Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about the books I read in September 2023. For this month, the strong focus has been working down and finishing my TBR. You will know from my videos that I started the year with 65 books. I believe I had around about 13 at the start of September, and I have actually been able to make it so that I only have 3 books left on my TBR, and all 3 of those books are my Penguin Monarchs books. So in terms of my personal satisfaction, I have pretty much finished my TBR, and I'm really delighted by that, but we will talk more about that as we get further on in this video. And I will probably start with the books that I have read. In September I read the following: The Lonely Empress, which is a biography of Elizabeth of Austria by Joan Haslip; Atalanta by Jennifer Saint; Disobedient by Elizabeth Freemantle; Tastes Like Shakkar by Nisha Sharma; The Weather Woman by Sally Gardner; Learned by Heart by Emma Donoghue; Harlots, Whores and Hackabouts, A History of Sex for Sale by Kate Lister; and a biography of Elizabeth Gaskell by Jenny Uglow. I had no rereads in this month, but I did have one DNF, unfortunately, which was Will by Christopher Rush, which is his historical fiction on the life of Shakespeare. I actually posted a couple of Insta stories of some of the writing in here, and I just found it so incredibly pretentious. This is Shakespeare as I dearly hope Shakespeare was not. In terms of a star rating breakdown, I had 2 books at a 3-star, which were Tastes Like Shakkar and The Weather Woman; 1 book at a 3.5, which was Atalanta; 1 book at a 3.75, which was The Lonely Empress; 2 books at 4-star, which were Harlots, Whores and Hackabouts and Elizabeth Gaskell; and then finally Learned by Heart and Disobedient I rated 4.25 star. A pretty good month for historical fiction. In terms of my fiction to non-fiction breakdown, it was 5 books at fiction, 3 non-fiction. And then in terms of genres, I read 3 historical fiction, 2 biography, 1 Greek mythology retelling, 1 romance and 1 history, which I feel is a fairly accurate portrayal of my reading generally. And then finally, in terms of where my TBR is at, as I say, I started September the 1st with 13 books. I've done a pretty poor job of actually noting books that I bought or received, but I feel like I didn't buy anything in September. I took off or on hold 1 book, I read 8 from my existing TBR, and then DNF'd 1 book, which has left me with 3 books left on my TBR, which, as I say, are my Penguin Monarchs books. So we have Canute by Ryan Lavelle, Edward the Confessor by David Woodman, and then William the First by Mark Morris. And these, even though obviously I'm holding on to them, even though I do definitely want to read them, are kind of a slower project than my normal TBR books. So in terms of saying that they are on my TBR, they're also not necessarily on my immediate TBR. They are kind of those library builders that I've spoken about before. So I almost like mentally do not include them. But yeah, basically I feel like my TBR is at a place where it is essentially 0, which feels really, really good. Basically, aside from those Penguin Monarchs books, I have managed in this month to complete all of the books that I had left from 2021 and 2022, and pretty much, once again, aside from these Penguin Monarchs books, everything from 2023. So that feels very, very nice, and basically anything that I pick up from now is new. And for me, this is going to be an exercise in, just buy things as you know that you're going to read them. Don't go into a charity shop and buy a bunch of stuff, because I'll read it eventually, because I feel like it's very clear that I won't unless I force myself to do a project like this. I know other people have different relationships to their TBRs and how having lots of unread books makes them feel. For me, having a lot of unread books just makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but I don't think that should be the case for everybody. So there we go, that is everything for my September reading. At the moment, I'm actually heavily considering not doing roundups after this month. I've done a full year of doing these roundups where I very, very briefly talk about the books I've read, but I'm not going into any particular detail on those individual books. This was meant to be in lieu of wrap-ups, so that I was going to focus instead on doing more individual book reviews. And though I am doing more individual book reviews than I had done in years prior, I do feel like by not doing my normal wrap-ups that you would have seen like pre-September 2022, that me discussing the general range of my reading is really lacking, because there are some books that I look at that I just wouldn't do individual book reviews for, but are still important parts of my reading. One of the things that I do miss from the big wrap-up videos is that, in the same video I'm talking about a romance book, but then I'm also talking about a non-fiction history book or one of the new big literary fiction books. They're all clustered into one video, which is actually really nice and actually matches up with, my general reading, of course. I've recently been looking back at my old wrap-up videos, and I noticed how many people in my comments would be like, oh, I've never heard about this book, and I probably wouldn't have known if not for this wrap-up. But the reason that they came to that wrap-up was probably because of like a more popular book that I was also talking about, and they wouldn't have even considered looking at this different book had it not been for the wrap-up format. I also feel like I'm just generally not talking quite as much about the books, even though I am talking more in depth in some videos. At the same time, I also quite like the roundup format, because it means I can just talk very generally generally about my reading, and I can talk about my non-fiction to fiction breakdown, my genre breakdown, my style breakdown. So I'm thinking that what I'll do going forward is I will keep the roundup format, talking generally about my reading for each quarter of the year, but I might reintroduce wrap-ups with short little descriptions and reviews of the books I'm reading for each month. I haven't quite figured it out, but that's where my brain is right now, because I do know that some people did like the roundup format, but I just feel like I'm not talking quite as much about books, even though this is a booktube channel, or at the very least the books I'm talking about, it's not quite as varied as it was before. So there we go, those are all my very rambly thoughts about my September reading and my wrap-ups and roundups going forward. Do let me know if you've read any of the books that I've spoken about today. Alternatively, let me know about anything that you read in September and really loved. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.